Hi, welcome to Switching Mindsets. This is Anuradha, and I'm speaking to Mital Salia, a game therapist who's Mumbai based and also founder of Khel Khel Pe. Hi, Mital.
Hi Anuradha, I'm so
Yeah.
glad you reached out to me.
No, I was very intrigued because I think you are India's only game therapist.
Right,
Yeah, because even after I found out about you, I discovered you from some articles and I tried to look up game therapy and, nothing would come up. So,
right.
to realize you're probably very unique in this profession. So tell me, what is a game therapist? What do you do really?
I like this statement every time that just like doctors prescribe medicines, I prescribe games. And I believe that anything and everything can be resolved by playing, life skills, your mental health, your development, multiple things. So whenever you want to do something, uh, all I do is prescribe a certain game that play this game and this thing will improve. So the whole idea about game therapy is that games can influence the psychology and the neurology parameters of our development.
Yeah, you've explained that. I was looking in your book as well. This is your first book, you said, right? Game Your Mind, all about game therapy.
Correct,
Yeah,
correct. That was
reshape
my
your
first.
skills and emotions, become a better version of yourself by playing games. Yeah.
Correct.
So you're on to your third book right now, you said.
Right. I'm on to the third book, and that third book is, people is out of people's demand that they want games, uh, game ideas. So the third book is covering more than 100 games, just for brain fitness.
Oh, that's really great. So when we're talking about games, are we just talking about board games? Because I saw in your book you've written solo games, a lot of things, role-playing games, and you've also said that it's different from play therapy, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So, when we talk of game therapy, it can be everything. It is tabletop games, board games, solo games, puzzles, everything. And when it comes for senior citizens, I also include, mobile-based games because certain speed elements and all can be covered through that as well. But yeah, it includes all kind of play.
So what is the difference between tabletop and board games? It sounds, all this while I thought it's kind of the same.
Yes, it is kind of the same. It's just that, board games require a game board. Now, these days, there are so many games that come up which don't have a board. They might just have cards. They might just have certain other elements to be played, certain, just like, there might be some dexterity games and everything. So we are sitting on the table and playing with each other, but there may not be a board. That is why this term tabletop game.
Okay, like Uno or something like that.
Yes, Uno also gets categorized into card games. So
Okay.
the best example of a tabletop game is where there is no board, no card, specifically with players is, for example, Top That, Dr. Eureka, all these games are there.
Okay. So tell me, how did you get into this? Because I've been reading, that you trained as a counselor and then you were in the education sector
Right. So
and then, hmm,
I'm a counseling psychologist. And initially I worked with the education industry. So I worked with the top companies of India like Z, I was with Mexis, I was with EduComp, all of these. I was doing teacher training. And during my second last job, these things just started kind of bothering me that what is it that, we get exposed to certain subjects or certain, even English language for that matter, across our school education for 15 years till the college. And yet we do not, there are people who make grammatical errors. So what was it that, learning doesn't occur? 15 years you are exposed to the language and yet why isn't the learning occurring?
yeah, like some teachers could not speak English properly, right?
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. And I had about 17, 18 managers under me. So they would write a lot of faulty emails, grammatical errors in the emails. So this is where that, pinch came into me that what is it that's missing? And when I found out they were not vernacular medium, they were very much English medium people, yet so many grammatical errors. And then I realized that fun is an important element while learning, and that's how I started getting into the importance of fun. And then slowly, as I realized, I got deeper, I realized that games play a very, very important role in learning. And whatever is missing in the school education in terms of teaching logic, in terms of teaching strategic thinking, in terms of uh, teaching communication and language skills basically, because our education focuses more on the knowledge parameters, but often a lot of skills are missed out. That's where I realized that games play an important role. And the journey began there, that I started adding the fun elements, and then I started getting deeper. And the more I started playing and bringing in a range of games, I realized that this is, changing your brain functions. It is changing it's stimulating multiple lobes. So there came a phase where I would play a game and I would realize that by playing this game, this behavior changes can happen, or this lobe of the brain is getting stimulated. So I really got into the depth of the neuropsychology parameters. And that's how the whole term or the whole concept of game therapy was derived.
Do you remember which games that you played at that time and any experiences you had then?
Um, Not any specific games, like, I started bringing in a range of games at my house. But the very initial games that really, fascinated were fascination, sorry, were fascinating for me. I would say were more of these solo games, more of the puzzle games. So these
Okay.
games had a range of challenges, and the more you play, the more thinking was, to be put into that. And I realized that even after playing all the levels of challenges, when I come back to the second or the third level, I again have to put in that thinking element. It's not something that I have learned by heart, and now, it's no more a challenge to my brain. So this was what started the fascination for me. And then I started bringing in all types. Like it started with a single player game, then two player, and then I moved on to board games and all that.
Yeah, that's true because I mean, if you see the Rubik's Cube, we've all played it as kids, you know. And I remember
Correct.
I could do the entire cube then, but I can't do anything now. Or even if you do it once, it doesn't mean you can do it again. So
Correct.
that's
Correct.
very true, yeah.
True. And these days, of course, the kids learn the algorithms, but that's not how it is supposed to be solved.
Yeah, yeah, that's no fun. Like you're saying, the
It's
most,
like learning by heart again.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The fun element is missing.
Yeah.
So tell me, when it comes to games, so you also do game nights at home, you and your husband, right? You started with
Correct.
that.
Correct.
So what are
Correct.
these games and what do you all play?
So the whole concept of game night started, when I started bringing in games. The very initial days, I would tell my husband, "Okay, let's play this game," and he would be like, "Yaar, itna dimag tum lagao. I don't want to use so much brain. This is very taxing." Over the time, he just started, because there used to be games around. He would pick up. He started playing, and he realized that this is amazing. This is making so many changes. And then we shifted from a joint family to a nuclear, and we decided not to have the TV, the cable element at all. So then in the evenings we would have, a lot of free time because no TV. So we would end up playing games with each other, and it brought a lot of changes in our whole family, or mental health or bonding and multiple things. We suddenly realized that this is amazing. So my husband was the one who was like, this is something that needs to reach out to more people. So every time that we were free, he would say, "Okay, let's call this group. Now let's call this group." So all the social groups, the acquaintances, his sports groups, our office groups, we started inviting everyone that come over for a game night. And again, when we hosted game nights, it was not any specific games. We would actually begin with single player games. Then we would go on to these circle games, and then we would go on to these 4 player, 6 player games, and we would divide the entire group into smaller groups. But in the beginning, we would just keep something which all can play together. So we, kind of curated a range, and then we gave them an experience of everything.
That's great. You and your husband Parag, right?
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
So what are these games like single player, multiplayer? How do you move up if somebody wants to try that?
Okay, so there is nothing like moving up. It's just like a variety. It's like,
Right, yeah.
giving
Hmm.
you are going to a hotel, and there is a whole lot of menu, and I try to give you a taste of everything. And the single player games, some of my favorite are like the hide and seek series is there, hunt and hide is there, then traffic hour is there, rush hour it's called. So all of these games are like my favorite. The Brain Vita, of course, is all-time favorite. Solitaire. There are a lot of puzzle games that we play. So, certain things have to be solved just like a Rubik cube. There are multiple smaller puzzles, wooden
Like
puzzles.
jigsaw puzzles, you mean?
Not jigsaw really. These are puzzle
Jenga,
toys.
etc. Huh.
So not Jenga, but these are metallic puzzles, wooden puzzles, where you have to assemble pieces and create a form or separate the pieces in a certain manner,
Okay.
all of that. And jigsaw puzzles also came in later. So jigsaw is altogether a different world. But yeah, if I have to recommend people, then these single player games you find in multiple stores where they have a range of challenges. There will be 40 challenges, 50 challenges, some will have 100 challenges. And each of these involve different kind of thinking. Some will be a visual logic, some will just need a pure logic, some will need strategic thinking. And the commonest example that I can give or anybody can relate to is the marble solitaire or the brain vita. If you remember, we used to have play with these marbles where you hop over the marble and the one that is hopped over is discarded.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, only one marble should be left. So we used to try this multiple times because we would have 4 or 5 marbles left and we'll try it again. And so on similar lines, a lot of games now have come up in these stores which just allow you to solve challenges. And other certain games, if I have to recommend to people, is a lot of card games, especially my favorite most, or a game that I say every house should have. In India, it's called Find It First. In UK or the European countries, it's called the Dobble, and in US and around, it's called Spot It. It's a very common and famous game, but it's an amazing game that a 5-year-old will equally enjoy as much as a 40-year-old, as much as an 80-year-old. So it's a game for all ages, and 2 to 8 players can play that game.
Great, I should try that, yeah.
Yes, yes,
And I saw in one of your testimonials in the book, where a lot of people have said a lot of things. One, that, they came to your house and they thought they'd play for half an hour and then they were playing for 3 hours. And somebody has said that they realized their child had leadership skills.
right.
Or, things like that. It's very interesting because I remember during the pandemic, when nobody was getting out, so I was doing these sessions for my nieces and nephew, and a lot of friends' kids. So at that time, I remember, there was the youngest child was the most assertive. So, so actually, through the course of the game, and we play a lot at home, like Ludo and things like that. So you
Ah,
can see that somebody is very competitive and things like that. So you learn a lot about a child and
true.
even family members. So it's very true that through board games you get to know.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes. You come to know the behavior of people. You come to know the patterns, and a lot of virtues. Start revealing in a lot of different games. There are certain games which have a lot of interactive element also. So there, the emotional intelligence, the social intelligence also starts revealing, because a person who may be behaving absolutely different in other situations, in a game, many times their true self is revealed. So all of that, yes, does happen when you're playing. And as you said, the youngest was the most assertive when you were playing.
Yeah, yeah.
So this also, very often people say that why do you want to club? When we run classes, the games class, we never have age-wise class. I always have an 8-year-old and a 14-year-old
Yeah.
playing
So this one
together.
was also, I think, less than 8 years old at that time. So
Right. Because the younger a person is, the more creative and the lesser filters they have. As you grow old, you start having filters, then your decision making parameters start changing. So when you're playing with all ages, there is a lot of learning happening from everyone.
yeah, and when we're playing Ludo at home, it's crazy, because you're so competitive.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
And a lot of times, people say that no, let the child win. But I think that's the wrong way.
No,
And we also don't do that.
no, absolutely, it's a wrong way. Never let the child win. Be competitive or allow the child to think on their own. Because this is again one of the chapters I have in my book on games teach failure gracefully. Now,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so when a child fails in an exam or fails in some other thing, no, they are very depressed. But games is one thing where if they fail or they, lose, they will play that all over again and they will want to win. So what happens in the game now, you have a lot of enthusiasm and you start accepting failure. And then for the subconscious mind, for the brain, no, it gets easier to accept failure because games allow you to fail and you don't feel low. In the school, if in the report card it shows a failure, no, it's like I can't show my face.
Yeah, you're
But that will
labeled,
not
no?
happen.
Uh,
Yeah. But that will not happen in a game because everyone keeps losing off and on. Like even when we look at cricket, today maybe India is winning, someday Australia is winning, someday some other, but again India wins. So, there's this hope that no, this is not a permanent failure. So the games actually teach you failure very gracefully and allow the child to fail. They will learn to pick up their own strategies and ways of learning and
yeah,
playing.
that's true. Yeah. And you've also spoken about the neurological benefits and the happy chemicals that are released.
Yes, yes. So this is one most important virtue that game therapy, influences the behaviors or multiple diseases also is when most of us, and there are multiple statistics that show that most of us are undergoing stress at some level. Now for some the stress level is very high and then that can lead to anxiety, depression, or things which start needing medicines. Now actually in the brain there are five chemicals which get released. One of them is cortisol, which is the stress which gets released due to stress. As the cortisol levels increase, then these medicines become necessary, and that is where people go to psychiatrists for depression and all that. But if it is balanced by playing games, different games help activate the four other happiness hormones, that is the dopamine, the serotonin, the endorphin, and the oxytocin. So all of these hormones can get released by stimulating certain functions. And games actually stimulate those functions which allow the release of these happy hormones. And the more the happy hormones get released, the lesser the cortisol starts getting. So these biological or the hormonal changes can also occur when you are playing games on a regular basis.
Is this just by the fact that you're winning, or just the fact that you're just playing together or just having fun?
So every game has different function. Now, winning, of course, releases the dopamine because dopamine is stimulated by victory also. Now, oxytocin is a hormone which gets released when you're socializing. And this entire hormone had gone very low during the COVID times when we were all, yeah,
Isolated, yeah.
isolated and we were not meeting people. Now, when you're playing group games, the oxytocin gets released because that needs the social element, the people around. When we have people around and we feel happy, or they are with us, they're praising us, or they are talking to us, or we have that feel good factor, then that gets released. Endorphin is one hormone which usually is activated by pain. It's like the natural painkiller. So that way, different hormones get activated at different situations. So it's not just about winning. Even if you're not winning, there are games which don't have the winning element or the pure competition element. It's more of cooperative games, it's more of being together. And even that will help release certain hormones.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah. So, Mital, what would you say? Like, you also in your book and otherwise also, it's great for a family to play together.
correct.
So, which games would you recommend for that?
So for families to play together, one of course is the Find It First that I say is the all-time favorite and every house should have. What we do is I try to recommend a balance. Like Find It First is more of an attention and a speed game. Then there should be some game which allows the dexterity because that's an important function of the brain. And if we start looking at the old age, the dexterity element starts reducing. It also, leads to the dangers of having Parkinson's and all that. So that is why games which have a lot of hand movements, the speed games, like a game like Top That is my very favorite game. So in Top That, it is you are stacking these five objects in speed. You're competing with the other people, and the one who stacks the right as per the given challenge, the one who stacks in the right order with the right elements visible or hidden, wins that card. So it's a game of complete speed that all the four people are competing at the same time, but there's a lot of hand movement happening along with the eye hand coordination happening. So certain games like a card game, certain game like a dexterity game, and there should be a good game like maybe a sequence or multiple two-player games are available, Reversi, Othello, and all of these which allow strategic thinking. So not everyone enjoys chess. Chess is comparatively a longer game. But even if they are not liking chess, there are these smaller two-player games that can be brought. So a game that is stimulating the thinking parameters. And then there are the modern board games, which are very much like the real world simulations. So they allow a lot of elements of, let's say, social intelligence and emotional intelligence coming in, where we have to talk to people or we have to negotiate with people and all that. So again, there my one all-time favorite is coup. It is spelled as COUP. The P is silent. The game is coup, and it's more of a political influence game where we have to remove everyone. But that game teaches a lot. So yeah, these are three, four games that I would say everyone should have, and they can pick up games of their choice, but basically a mixture of fun, a mixture of dexterity, a mixture of thinking, and a mixture of emotional intelligence. All of that should be there.
Yeah, any Indian games? Because I've been reading, when I discovered you. So I was seeing that a
Yeah,
lot of Indian board game makers and there are a lot of new games. Of course, we have a lot of ancient games also.
correct,
So
correct.
anything around
So
that.
yes, so Find It First is definitely an Indian game. Uh, then if I talk of the modern board games, which I was saying, where the emotional and the social intelligence comes in, there are a lot of companies now that have started coming up with board games. And one of my favorite is the Dice Toy Labs, DICE, Dice Toy Labs. They have a range of board games. And of course, they have their Insta channel and everything. And these days, also, if I have to say other favorite games, let me just think. There are
Yeah,
so
you can tell
many.
me later. I'll put it in the description.
Definitely. So I
No
have about
problem.
400-500 games.
Okay.
And that is why, it's like so many things just pop up together.
Yeah, I can imagine, really. So tell me, you're actually prescribing board games, right, as a therapist. So could you tell me some cases where somebody came to you with a problem and then, or a challenge, and then you prescribed a particular board game or a game? How does it work?
Okay. Yeah. So basically, I don't do one-to-one sessions, not like a counselor. My game prescriptions are more in the lecture, more on the workshop mode. But yes, I have a lot of case studies. So because we run full year classes for children, there is this one particular case study that's very close to my heart where I had this child coming to me for 3-4 years. He used to come for my language class before which I did with games. And thereafter he joined my game class. And in the game class, we always, every third turn, we would have these team games, team building games, which are done in the corporate. And this child, like always, he said, I will become the leader. He always wants to be the leader, but he didn't have the leader qualities really. So for him, it was about pushing people. And that day, he had this another child who was very slow in doing, and that is why when they were competing with the other team, they felt they were going too slow. So he was kind of pushing that girl that do it fast, arey karna. And she at a point got so irritated that she said nahi hota hai mujhse, this is my capacity, I can't do beyond. So that boy actually had to keep quiet, and because we have certain rules for team games and all that. And he still persisted, and they finished the game and everything. And in the debrief, he told these words which was like a magic. He actually said that, miss, every time I take up leadership, and if the team can't do, I leave it halfway. Today I pushed myself beyond, and I kept that patience, and I learned that as a leader, I need to be along with everyone, and everyone has a different capacity, and I can't give up halfway, and I stayed till the end. It was such a beautiful and a very deep learning that just came out. And I feel such learnings happen when you are in the corporate and such times, or at least in the college days. But for a 10-year-old, that learning was a very, very big achievement.
Yeah. Huge
Uh,
achievement. Yeah.
yes, huge achievement. Another such child had a humped back and he had no confidence. I remember when he came on day one, even if I asked him, did you like the game or not? Usko yes ya no bolna for him was a big thing. He just would smile, but he couldn't answer. And over the years, in just 1.5 year, he was like, every game when I asked, okay, who's giving the first review, and he would raise his hand. The level of confidence, the level of thinking, the level of facing people, being with people, or accepting himself had completely changed because of the games class. So there are many, many such success stories with women, with adults, with senior citizens. But yeah, these two are very close to my heart.
Hmm. No, I can imagine. Yeah. Because I guess when you're playing a game, then everybody's equal in that
Correct.
moment. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And these learnings, when even when we are doing workshops with women, we do like full year sessions with women, like a kitty party concept, but we make them play. So these changes actually happen over the time. Game is something which can't just, I always compare this. Women connected much faster. That when you do a facial, they always say that first day glow won't come. It will be after 2-3 days that the glow comes. But if you are regular at it, the skin completely changes. When the skin treatment is happening or whatever. So the same way in the game, it's not the first seating or one time that you play, but when you're regularly playing certain games, it starts making changes inside the neuro pathways, inside the hormones, and multiple other changes. And then over the time, you realize that it's altogether a new personality that's formed.
That's wonderful. And
Yeah.
all just having fun, really.
Absolutely. That is the best thing about games, that it's never a teaching, learning session. It's always just playing, and it works.
Yeah.
And
What
yeah.
about entrepreneurs? You've said that, warfare, people before going to wars in ancient times, people would play board games for
Yeah.
strategizing. And even today, it can help you, it can help entrepreneurs strategize, etc. How does that work?
So this is the best trivia I tell people, that if we look back into the history, we peep into the history, we realize that any games that we've known, chess, chopard, other war games, were never played by kids. You look into the history, like chess is always known to be the game of kings. In Mahabharata, we saw the chopard or the pachisi, the ancient form of Ludo. So we never saw kids playing it, right? It was
Right.
always
Yeah.
kids
Mm.
just played outdoors.
Yeah.
And over the time, it so became that, for people buy games only for kids. But when we really look into the wisdoms of the ancient days, it was always the adults who played games. And even today, we have these rituals after marriage where the couple is made to play games. So in the ancient days, because the husband wife didn't know each other, there were games that would help break the ice. And when we talk of warriors and the kings or the strategy, of course, for the king, when they go on the war front, it cannot happen that they sit there and then start thinking on the strategies. So they actually played different war games. Shatranj is the most famous one, the chess, but there are multiple other war games that different kings or different warriors used to play to enhance their strategic skills, which allowed them to actually act fast onto the war field. So this was a learning tool for them. The games were not really given too low a value or an entertainment value. It was a very high-end learning tool for these people.
Yeah, I can imagine because your brain is already working, no?
Correct,
It's got kick-started.
correct,
Yeah.
correct.
So what are some games that, maybe corporate professionals, any working professional can play, or sometimes, you suffer from burnout.
Right,
So, yeah, so, you just, I mean, you feel like you're at the end of your thinking power. You can't think anymore. Creativity is finished. So,
correct.
so how do you refresh with a board game or just keep yourself going?
So for burnouts, for stress, for anything, pick up any game that you've been playing constantly, but it should at least be a 2 to 4 player game. So when you're playing with people, it does work at multiple levels. Any game that does not have too much of competition, and more of the fun, or more of that element where we are just, there's too much of laughter, there's too much of happiness in that. So again, as I said, find it first for me remains at the top of the list always. And here again, why I'm recommending is because it's a very quick game. It's a 5 minute. If you just want to refresh, it's a 5-10 minute game that you can play and again, refresh yourself.
I wanted to ask you before I forget this mathematical game that we discussed, Palanguri. Huh.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that is so interesting. If you could tell us a little about that.
Sure. So Pallanghuzhi is, of course, a beautiful calculation game, and it in the ancient in the European countries it's called the Mancala, and in that they have the six, they have six dents, but the Indian or the Asian version has seven dents. And when I learned about this game, so I used to travel across India just collecting ancient games. I would go to these smaller villages, talk to people, and when I came across this game, I found this lady who was 70-year-old and who used to play in her childhood. And she said we used to play this game day long. Like it would just go on and on. So when I was playing with my husband, I remember it would go on for 2 hours, 3 hours also. But there are rounds. So we, kind of end, okay, at this round, let us end and then we continue the game. It's a game where you just in it's made out of these wooden board where there are seven dents. In the ancient days, they would just make these pits even in the ground, and they would play with the imli seeds or the pebbles or the stones or whatever. But these days we have these cowrie shells or whatever that can be played. And it's a game where we are trying, like we have seven pits on our side and the opponent has seven pits, and we try to collect more and more seeds. So we have to actually start putting seeds in a way that there are more seeds towards our side. So there it needs a lot of calculation in terms of what is going to go in my first move, in my second move, and the third move, and the fourth move. So there is so much of mental calculation that you are doing to play this game. And there are times when we just start, we don't even realize that, our brain gets tired. I can't do so much calculation, leave it. But as you keep playing ahead, your mind and your brain automatically gets trained to do those calculations. And it can go on for hours and hours with the least rules. And I talked about this Tamil lady I told you, whom I met.
Yeah.
She was in Madurai. She said, me, my aunt, my masi, my nani, we all used to play, and that they had a huge piece in the veranda of their house, an ancient South Indian house they had. And she said, anytime that any two of us are free, we would just pick up from wherever the game is, and then whatever few hours we'll play, and when we are tired we'll get up, and maybe my nanny will come and continue the game. So this is how she said the game would go on for days together.
Yeah, that's lovely. And they must be all
Yes.
mathematical geniuses for all you know.
And this lady that I talked about, she definitely is a mathematical genius. She's written a book on Vedic mathematics, and
Oh, okay.
she was appreciated by Dr. Abdul Kalam as well. So
Okay.
she definitely is a mathematical genius.
Okay. Do you remember her name?
Yes, yes. Her name is Rajeshwari Sharma.
Okay, wonderful.
So
And
she
tell me
teaches
this.
maths.
Okay, this it's very interesting that you travel through villages, to researching on games. Can you tell us a little bit at least about that?
Uh, this again, my journey started somewhere in 2015, 16, maybe 17, when I started unschooling my son. So at that point of time, I just started getting, I had this game called Nine Men Morris. And I realized that this is an amazing game. It's a more complex version of tic-tac-toe. So, we play this X and Zero, which we've always played in the school days. But Morris also needed that three in a row. But it was a little more rules and little longer game, more complex version of it. It was so beautiful that constantly I was playing that game multiple times, and I realized that, oh my God, the level of thinking that's happening here, it's beautiful. And I said, if this, I started reading about it and I realized that there were so many ancient games that existed. And then when I got deeper, I realized there are many games, most of them we will find in the South India as well. So I decided to just go and keep seeing. And as I was doing that, I came across this history that Mysore is the board game capital of India. And the Mysore king Krishna Dev Raya III, during the rules of the Mughals and all. He was, 9 years he was in the palace. He was not supposed to rule. And those 9 years, he created his own board games. He used to make board games. He used to play board games. And he was amongst the top 10 people in the entire world who could solve certain chess puzzles. So that is altogether a different long thing, but there is a particular chess puzzle, and he was amongst the top 10 people in the world who could do that. And he used to make a lot of games and gift it to, a lot of different people. So his gifted games are there in the British Museum, in multiple museums world over. That is what created more interest in me, that oh my god, a king like him, who is considered so intelligent, was playing so many board games. And then I started going deeper. I went to Mysore, I went to different places, and in Mysore again I found this book which has I can't recall the name of the book, but this has many games of the South India. So I started reading each of the game, and I realized that there were games of different genres. Some game would teach you war strategies, some game will teach you these calculative strategies, some games were all about thinking. I like the both the players have different powers. They were hunting games. So, and some games were the continuous games where the winning element was not there, but a constant play movement is happening. That is how my collection started. I started talking to people I know. I started asking people what were the games you played in your childhood. And then I realized that when you go to these ancient temples also, often there will be on the floors a lot of etching done. And then I would realize, oh, this is this game. This is this game, because I started collecting. Now when I go to these temples and the floors and the walls and all, we can actually find out that so many games were being played across the world.
So
So I have a huge collection.
did you find these games actually anywhere?
Yeah, yeah, I did. I did. So there are certain shops which have come up with the newer or the more state of art forms of these games. But when we talk to people, they would actually see in the olden days, no, they wouldn't buy a board game. They used to etch things, or they would make on a paper and use some seeds or use some buttons and all that. So that is how a lot of people started teaching different games. Then on the net also I started researching, I started getting, then I realized there are these few bodies that have these ancient board game conventions and all that. So I got associated with them. Then in Mysore, there is a store which every year, currently also, this ancient board game festival is going on from I think 15th May to 30th May. But every 2 years, they host this ancient board game festival. So they actually display a range of
Where is
games.
this festival?
This happens at Mysore
Mysore, okay.
store. Yeah, a store called Ramson's.
Okay.
They
Interesting.
have this display, and they have the state of art games. And the more I started talking to them, they also have been collecting ancient paintings and games from different people. And I also could get, somebody's nani, dadi would have, some grannies would have some games. So I would ask them, please show, your collection. I would love to see. That is how I started getting more of it.
What fun, really, and so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. And before, I talk about your experience as an unschooling mom, what about video games? Kids play a lot of video games. Does that come into game therapy or is it completely at odds with it?
So video games do come into game therapy, but to a very limited and controlled level. So I don't recommend kids playing video games or mobile games, for the simple element that even when we pick up mobile games, no, we get addicted. Now, of course, the speed element or the attention element that a digital game can provide cannot happen in the real time game. That is why it is important. But doing anything in excess starts affecting the brain. And there are researches that have shown, especially, when kids are playing games, no, they don't monitor if it's a violent game, if there is a hitting element. Now, if we see a lot of these games, no, it's scary. Okay, if you don't run, you will come under the train. If you don't move, you will fall down the valley and all of that. Now, these are all a lot of direct and indirect violent elements, and playing a lot of violent games playing a lot of violent games paralyzes the frontal lobe of the brain. So the decision making factor, the emotional intelligence parameters, all these get highly affected or they get completely paralyzed. That is why we keep hearing these suicide or the excess depression stories of people who have been playing too much of games like the PUBG ones, or those fighting games or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
army
Hmm.
games. So this is because and the researchers have shown this, that when you're playing too much of it, it paralyzes your emotional reasoning, it paralyzes your thinking, it paralyzes your intelligence, the human factors and all that. That is why I do not recommend video games and screen games at all for children. For adults who are 40, 45 plus, it becomes very important to use an app based game, but to a limit. So you should really very strictly have this time limit, that I shouldn't play more than half an hour or 1 hour a day. And I would really like to point this out at this point. Some of the best neurologists in the world, they have their own game companies, and there are multiple, like even in my book I have recommended, but there are multiple apps which are developed by neurologists or the neuroscientists, and these are for the brain training. So after 30 and 40 years of age, that brain training apps become very important. So play mobile apps or play these app based games or the digital games, but within a limit, and avoid violent games. That is the only
Yeah. Can
recommendation.
you give some examples? Do you remember, or you can send it to me later?
So Lumosity is my top favorite, and for last 4 or 5 years, every year it is being rated in the top 3 or 4 apps, mobile apps for brain training. Then there is an app called Brain HQ, which is developed by the neuroscientists. And besides that, people can play things like Sudoku, the logical puzzles. Then there is this app called Einstein Riddle, which is a very good logical puzzle game. So all of these are, they would fall in my top 10 apps list.
Yeah, very useful information. Thank you. Okay, so you're coming to your experience as an unschooling mom. So what I understand from unschooling is that the child is completely out of the traditional schooling system, right? So
Correct.
they don't have classes, they don't have lessons. It's not even homeschooling. The child
No.
basically studies at his pace and goes in any direction they choose to, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Right. Yes. So that is how we did when my son was about a little over 13 years. So he was about to enter his ninth grade, and that is when I made a decision. I told him, you either go to a hostel or don't go to school. And it came as a shock to him. So he was like, no, I can't miss out school. So I said, no, no, I don't think there is any value. Please. So we had a lot of discussion, and I had to convince him. And all I had told him is, you give me any one application that you can, use in your daily life that you're learning from the school. His major reasons were friends. So I said, you go meet your friends every day, but no schooling. And it was like, what will we do then? And when we decided, we had no timetable, we had nothing in mind. It was just that you drop school, we'll figure out kya karna hai.
But what
And
was
that's
your
how.
trigger at that time?
So my trigger, of course, my trigger was very long. I would say a long duration trigger. It was not really a trigger. Because I worked in the education industry, I did teacher training for more than 7 years across India. I've seen education system in and out, from the elite most school to the rural most school. I always felt that, the real life skills or the street smartness was missing. And ninth and 10th grade was completely a pressure on the mind to perform and get marks for the admission rather than actually learn something for life. So for me, I didn't want that to happen with my son. I wanted him to pick up on life skills. And that time I completely pulled him out, and he was very much interested in wildlife and all. So I said, you can go learn about wildlife. And when I pulled him out of school, there was no tuition teachers, there was nothing related to study, there was no timetable for him, and he wanted to learn about reptiles. So I started searching for people who could train this young boy, because everyone was saying that we can't, he's not 18, we can't train him for reptiles. And somebody in Bangalore agreed, and I sent him there, and that's how we started the journey. He started living with 300 animals and learning everything about them, practicals. like, taking care of them, feeding
Where
them.
was this? Where did he go?
So this place at that time had not developed. It was just a farm being, where the animals were being collected. Today, it's a very well-known place called Prani, the Pet Sanctuary, which is run by this boy called Sanjeev Pednikar. And there, of course, by the time Rushil was there for 2 years. So after 7-8 months, this place started opening up to people. It was named Prani, and a lot of, like at times 100, 200 kids would come. So my son also learned facilitating about the animals and teaching others about these animals and all that. So this was the journey we began with, no studies, but he was living with the animals, and his major interest was reptiles. So by the age of 14, 15, he had learned about 150 snakes, which he could identify and understand if it's venomous, non-venomous, and what kind of habitat they live in. And he has
Wow.
started
With
rescuing the
live
snakes.
live experience.
Yes, yes, with live
Hmm.
one. So he has started rescuing wherever he would go. He had started rescuing animals. Um, then, of course, he started doing other internships. He started doing certain herpetology courses. So he met other herpetologists of India. So for 2 years, he was into animals. Then he realized that in India, he felt, there isn't too much scope. He didn't want to go to Australia for reptiles. And I think by the age of 14 and a half or 15, he was so clear. He's like, Mummy, reptiles is my lifetime passion, but not my career. So this he would have probably, had he been in the school, he would have finished his BSc zoology and herpetology, and then realized after working with snakes, because every exposure till then is books. But because he worked in the fields, he could make that decision at the age of 15 that this remains my lifetime passion, but not my career. And then, we started looking for more things. So he did his scuba diving, multiple certifications from age 16 till now. He's been constantly going deeper into that. He did his snowboarding. He started going into agriculture. And then we started putting him into different internships related to agriculture. And of course, the board games and the games were constantly on. So the thinking and the strategic parameters started getting much better. And 2 years after his unschooling, we dropped him out of school. The COVID, started and all that. So in those days, because the buildings were sealed and people were not moving out, all the youngsters of our building would come to our house to play games because they had nothing else to do. So at such times, they started playing these high-end board games, which I recommend, the CEOs or the managing directors of companies can play. That is the level of thinking it develops. And my husband being in stock market, my son having doing playing these strategic games, he also developed a lot of financial and analytical thinking over the
Hmm.
time.
Which games are these? Can you mention one or two?
So our topmost favorite is Splendor, all-time favorite.
Okay.
And Splendor, I think during the lockdown, they must have played over 200 times. And it's a very nice game if you have to teach, savings and the financial basic
Right.
parameters. But besides that, Wingspan is one, Coup is one, Seven Wonders is another game. So these are some of the games that we've played, and Century Spice Road. These are some of the games that we played repeatedly. And yes, so these started bringing in the thinking parameters in him. So all the, just making him travel across India without any support. Like I never went with him to even drop him to the airport or the railway station. He had to figure out his own ways to travel anywhere. And he's traveled by the rail, by the airways, and by the bus to various parts of the country. This all for me was the learning lessons for him. And of course, my travel journey. So, traveling for us has always been one important schooling or the learning uh, parameter for him.
Yeah, wonderful. Like life is an adventure, really.
Yes,
Children get depressed. There's so much pressure, so much stress, and here, you're in seeing life for what it is.
exactly.
Yes,
And
he's
that is why
21. He's
he's
21.
21 now.
Hmm.
But at 16, 17, he had met with an accident, and very small, nothing major. But the proactiveness or the alertness or the ability to think immediately and act. Like he had another person with him who was at least 4 years elder to him, but my son could act faster. So this is, what I felt, that when I threw him out into the world, those life skills itself have made him far more mature than probably an education system would do.
Yeah, congratulations. So he's given his 10th and 12th privately, you said, right?
He did his 10th and 12th privately, and he's doing his BSc Sciences, which he's, been dropping in between. But I think in a year or two, he should be able to finish his BSc Sciences as well.
Yeah, that's great that you took the initiative.
Yes.
So do you have a community of unschooling parents, or is it just something you decide on your own?
So there are communities. I keep going for these conferences once in a year, but I'm not associated with anything on a continuous basis.
That's wonderful, Mital. So tell me finally any message to anybody like me, about games, playing games, how it helps, how we should incorporate it into our supposedly busy schedules.
Okay, so I would have two messages, one for the kids, one for the adults. So, one very important part of my work today is the brain fitness, where I, do these workshops for the not just senior citizens, for adults, because very lesser known fact is that our brain starts shrinking at the age of 30. So, any of the neurodegenerative diseases, once they are visible to us, they may have developed at least 10, 12 years before they are visible. So, the moment you cross 30 or 40 years of age, take a lot more importance in playing games, because that will help slow down the aging of the brain or deteriorating of the brain functions. And in fact, on the other side, games actually stimulate brain functions and improve the health of brain. So this is a message for the adults, that do not undervalue games. Keep it a part of your regular life. This is the very mission of my company, Khel Khel Mein, to bring back the game culture in every house. And other message for the kids is that start as early as possible. By the age of 1.5, the kids should have been exposed to games, and especially when they are in 8th, ninth standard, parents cut down on the play element, but I feel that's a very important element. And the best thing is to subscribe libraries, toy libraries. So currently I'm an advisor for this library called the Elephant, and they actually are curating everything in terms of life skills and everything. So something like this should be subscribed for every child, and they should be exposed to all kind of games rather than buying these one or two games from the stores. The libraries allow a range of games, and that range of games will help stimulate a range of different skills. So yeah, that's my message. Keep playing games irrespective of the age.
Yeah, keep playing. Yeah, that's a great note to end on. Yeah, thank you, Mital. Thanks so much.